All right. Well, good evening, everyone. Hey, before we get started, I want to make sure everyone understands that this is an interactive class. So the higher the ratio of you talking to me talking, the better off we'll all be. So any questions, comments, don't worry about asking a question too hard. Someone here will be able to answer it. Speaking of which, I do want to take this time to praise the high school class. I've had the honor of teaching them this semester, and they have really done well at that. They are much more interactive than most high school classes I've taught. All right, so for today, let's get a little bit of an orientation here. We're in Romans 12, as we have been for the summer, and apologize that's not even close to lined up, but that's all right. Y'all get the point. So tonight we're going to be studying Romans 12:16. If y'all want to turn to Romans, you can. Romans 12 is kind of like a primer for Christian living. And for the summer series, we are taking different sections and going over those. So Romans, if you're not aware, written by Paul to the Romans. It was written to the church in Rome specifically, but of course letters were passed around past that. But you'll see why I mentioned that in just a moment. All right, so what does Romans 12:16 say? So the full verse is, "Be of the same mind towards one another. Do not set your mind on high things, but associate with the humble. Do not be wise in your own opinion." And that last sentence is what I was specifically asked to talk about. Okay, so do not be wise in your own opinion. When you hear that phrase, what do you think, what comes to mind, someone who is wise in their own opinion? They think they're smarter than everybody else. Did I hear pride? Pride?
We said know-it-all.
Know-it-all? Yeah. Arrogance, maybe. I would point out, I don't necessarily take it as this person has to be arrogant. There's other ways to take this. They could be misinformed, right? There's also something called the Dunning-Kruger effect. Okay, so the Dunning-Kruger effect, the real shortened version of it, is that someone who is slightly educated in something tends to value their opinion on it. Someone who is very well versed in it, has their PhD, that type of thing, tends to think they're not as smart as they are. The reason is the more educated you are, the more you know you don't know, right? So it's a very real phenomenon. If you don't believe me, check out Facebook. Okay, so the reason I actually did get to choose which verse I was going to talk on. The reason I chose this is it reminds me of one of my favorites, which is Proverbs 14:12. There is a way that seems right to a man, but its end is the way of death. Okay, those are not one for one, right? First of all, Old Testament, New Testament, one was written specifically to the church. The other one's a little bit more broad, but we're going to kind of cover both. Okay, so do not be wise in your own opinion. So we're going to talk about this in 3 different sections, because I was told that you had to have 3 different parts. First is outside of Christianity. You'll notice that's in quotes. So that is outside of people who decide, claim to be Christians, okay? Next one's pretty obvious. Inside of Christianity. So again, anyone who would say, yes, I am a Christian. And then inside the church. Okay, again, Romans was written to the church in Rome. I don't mean to take this out of context too much, but if we look at, well, how can people outside of Christianity be arrogant or things like that, we can keep from falling into similar traps, okay? So outside of Christianity, you could think other religions, atheism, agnostic, things like that. Inside Christianity, more denominationalism, and then, of course, inside the church. Okay. So let's get into it. First of all, outside the church. So I'll start us off with one example, and then we can go from there. So one way that we could go wrong with being wise in our own opinion is assuming that science and God are incompatible. So I'm by the way, going to be having 1 or 2 verses for each of these. So if you would, please look this up, and I need someone to read each one. I promise there's no hard Old Testament names. It's generally 1 or 2 verses at most. So these are really easy readings, okay? So how could you assume that science and God are incompatible? What's some things you can think of? Evolution, yeah. I mean, that's maybe the main one. I don't know. An obvious one at least. Very good. What else? Oh, yes. If you've never read the Bible, yeah, good point. Yes?
You may be going to this, but science and God are completely compatible. The
Yes.
problem is when somebody wants to take a science and turn it around to prove or disprove what their own agenda is.
Yes.
But science and God they go hand in hand.
Exactly. Can someone read for us Genesis 7 and 8?
And Noah and his sons,
I'm sorry, chapter 7, 8, and 9. Yes.
of clean animals, and of animals that are not clean, and of birds, and of everything that creeps on the ground, 2 and 2, male and female, went into the ark with Noah, as God has commanded Noah.
Okay, so we got 2 animals of every kind. NIV actually says of every kind. And then you have, they're going onto this ark. Okay, so question, how big is an elephant? I don't know. I mean, they're big, right? They're like big, 20 feet tall maybe? I don't know, 15 feet tall, something like that. Yes, I know there's Asian and African elephants. I think the African elephants are the bigger ones. So they're very, very big animals, right? So you got how many of those? You got 2, right? I'm assuming those are unclean. I actually don't know that. But anyway, so very big animals. There's 2 of them, and we're going to put them on an ark, okay? And now we're going to feed them for a long time, right? Rain for 40 days, 40 nights, and then past that, right? That's not actually what the Bible says, is it? I think we kind of do this to ourselves. How many of y'all have taught like preschool and you had the little plastic Noah's Ark and you put the animals on? And those were full-size animals. That's what we were taught, right? Okay, so there's actually a YouTube channel, Answers in Genesis, which is really interesting. I cannot vouch for all the information on it, but it's some interesting stuff. And one of the things it pointed out was, why would you take full-size elephants? God said to take 2. They come in small sizes, right? So if you take the baby elephants, a boy and a girl, then first of all, they'll fit a lot easier, right? But you also don't have to feed them as much, okay? So this is one, I mean, I honestly had never even thought about that until it was probably 6 months ago. I happened upon that YouTube channel and all that. And so I was wise in my own opinion, if you will, that I knew what size animals were being put on there. The other part that I shouldn't forget is it says 2 of each kind of animal. Okay, how many kinds of dogs are there? I don't know, hundreds, right? I mean, you got German Shepherds, you got Labradors, all that, right? That's not what God meant, right? When you can breed animals and come up with different styles of dogs. Now there's the Labradoodles and stuff like that. Okay, those didn't always exist. There were fewer types, first of all, but God didn't need a Labradoodle, a Labrador, a German Shepherd, all that. God just needed the base, right? He only needed 2 dogs. Now, did he have 2 dogs and 2 coyotes? I don't know. Maybe those are far enough separated that he did have separate ones. But my point is, he didn't have 2 of every subspecies of animal. That was not required. Okay, so I'm going to pause there. I'm not going to show you the future ones and cheat. What are some other ways that outside of Christianity, someone might be wise in their own opinion? What can you think of? Some examples. And the teen class is allowed to talk.
The age of the earth, for one thing.
Oh, the age of the earth. I don't actually have that one. That's good. Yes. And that's actually one of my favorites because how do we determine the age of the earth? How do scientists do it? Well, they use carbon dating. Okay. Okay, we got a chemist back here who's going to tell me this is wrong, but this is the close enough version of carbon dating. Basically, you got carbon 12 and 14, right? And I believe it's carbon 12 that goes up into the atmosphere. It gets hit by UV and turns into carbon 14. And so there's this equilibrium of carbon 12 and 14 when someone's breathing in all the time. All right, now you've got this mixture of carbon 12 and 14. We know what that mixture is supposed to be. Good. We're good, right? So now a tree breathes it in, or he's not taking in oxygen, but the carbon dioxide, tree dies, you can carbon date the tree, and the carbon 14 decays at a certain rate. Great, everything works. Amazingly enough, carbon dating and science and the Bible, there is no disagreement on age of anything until the flood. Well, that's curious. What happened in the flood? Well, one of the theories, and honestly, I can't really get my head around this, is that there was a layer of water over all the earth. And I mean over, like stratosphere somewhere up there. Okay, so there's a layer of water over all the earth. That would do a couple of things. One, it would slow down the amount of UV rays that were hitting the earth. What ages us? Well, UV rays is one of the things. It causes the oxygen, I forgot what you actually call that. But anyway, it causes us to age faster. Wow, people sure did live a lot longer before Noah, didn't they? Okay, the other thing that it would do, it would block UV from hitting carbon. So the carbon 12 to 14, wait a minute. You would have a different amount. There wouldn't be as much carbon 14. Well, what does that mean? Well, when you carbon date something, you're assuming you know what equilibrium is. All of a sudden, we don't anymore, right? It was different. Now, maybe some scientists can actually figure out what it should have been and do all that. But in other words, if the more we know, the more we found out, exactly to your point, the Bible was right. It's our science that needs to catch up. Okay, that was a great example. I actually didn't have that one. Anyone else have examples of outside of Christianity, how someone could be arrogant, maybe, or thinking that Christians aren't as good as they say they are, that type of thing? Trying to get clues. Philosophers, okay? All right. So with philosophers, how can that go wrong? How can they think that maybe they know better than the Bible, better than Christians?
Puts humans at the center of creation.
Yeah. So first of all, philosophy, it's the love of thought, right? So if you sit a guy in a room to think for too long, then he's going to come up with all sorts of interesting ideas, right? So you get things such as Nietzsche. Nietzsche, basically nihilism, it's all meaningless. My more favorite one, Epicureanism, which, what's the quote? Eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. I think I got that slightly wrong. But in other words, people will come up with their own models of how we're supposed to be, what morals we should have without the Bible. Okay, so that was actually next. Can someone read for us Colossians 2 and verse 8? Sorry, I didn't give you much time there. Colossians 2, verse 8.
See to it that no one takes you captive by philosophy and empty deceit, according to human tradition, according to the elemental spirits of the world, and not according to Christ.
Very good. All right, any other comments, questions on that one? Okay, some other ideas. Someone be looking up Matthew 7:21. We'll get there in just a second. Conflating Christians and Christians. Okay, what does that mean to y'all?
I mean, there's like the idea of what Christians should be. Like, oh, like they'll like use the argument, well, that's not Christian of you.
Mm-hmm.
They have read the Bible. And then there's like actual Christians that are defined by the Bible. And there's people who blend the two and are confused with me.
Exactly. So I'd say there's kind of two separate substreams of this maybe. One is exactly that, where people have an idea of Christians, and actually I think that would even closer fall into my next point, but The other way would be where people see what people do who claim to be Christians, and they say, oh, okay, well, look how terrible a person they actually are, that type of thing. I am really mixing these two points a little bit too much. And so they say, well, that's just wrong, or that's not good enough, or whatever. So there's some denominations in the U.S., that have a lot of bad things going on with them, and they look at it and they say, oh, well, look, that is Christianity, right? Can someone read for us 7:21, please, Matthew?
Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, shall enter the kingdom of heaven, but he who does the will of my Father in heaven.
Okay, so I've been caught off guard before, talking with people, and they will suddenly ask, it's like, well, what church are you? What, that type of thing. And I say, oh, well, I'm just Christian. And they'll swing back real quick and say, oh, what does that mean? Okay, so I tell them, and they say, well, do you think the people who are not part of the church are not Christians? Well, they usually phrase it a little bit different. It's like, oh dear. It's like, okay, here's the verse. It doesn't matter what I think. Here's the verse. This is what we try to do. However, this very closely ties into the next verse. Someone please be looking up 1 John 1:7. Conflating Christians with perfect. Okay. So Robert, I can't remember if it was in his Sunday morning class or the lesson, he gave, it might not have been this exact verse that he used, but it is the similar topic. Christians are not perfect. We are cleansed. God is the one who cleanses us through the blood of Christ. It's really hard to get that point across to people. One of the best ways I've heard it said is that, the church is kind of like a hospital. It's for those who are sick, those who need help. If we didn't need help, then we wouldn't need to be here. So are we hypocritical? It's like, well, we try not to be. Obviously, sometimes we can be. It's not that we're trying to be hypocritical. We're trying to do better, but yes, we fail, right? Okay, can someone read for us that 1 John chapter 1, verse 7, please?
But if we walk in the light, as he is in the light, we have fellowship with one another. The blood of Jesus Christ, his Son, cleanses us from all sin.
So, exactly to the point, Jesus, his blood is what cleanses us. It's not that we are perfect. We're just forgiven. Okay, and then finally, and I'm not saying if y'all have other points, we can add them, but Christians, conflating Christians with the naive. Okay, so someone can be looking up Hebrews 11, verse 1. This is a little bit different from assuming science and God are incompatible. This is not even thinking about science or anything like that. They just think, well, Christianity is old wives' tales or something like that, right? And people who are Christians just accept through absolute blind faith, no evidence whatsoever, that type of thing. Okay, so can someone read for us Hebrews 11, verse 1?
The substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen.
Okay. The evidence of things not seen. What does that mean? Do we have evidence of God?
It's always the example of evidence of things not seen.
Yep. I'm sorry. I should be repeating what people are saying. I forgot. It might be hard for others to hear. So the wind, for example, where it exists, you can feel the effects of it, but you can't see the wind itself. You can only see the effects of the wind. Nature in general. If you want my opinion, I don't know why you would. My favorite example is an eye, okay? So if you talk to people who believe in evolution, they're like, well, there was a fish or something, and then, a monkey, and okay, fine. But the eye, it's always supposed to be that it moves in small increments. Why did an amoeba need an eye, right? And how do you get from not having any visibility, sense of light, nothing, to all of a sudden, hey, look, I can focus. Not me, I have terrible eyes, but normal people. To me, that's the best example I can come up with. There are others. Yes?
We weren't alive when Jesus lived and died on the cross and then was resurrected.
Yes.
We all believe that. And Jesus even told Thomas, when Thomas doubted, he said, and he committed him once he did say, my Lord, my God, but he said, blessed are those who don't see and yet will believe. But we don't believe just blindly.
Right.
We believe based on a preponderance of evidence. 1 Corinthians chapter 15, 1 through 6, I think, talks about not only the apostles, but 500 plus eyewitnesses. And those testimonials, when we read the Gospels, we read different things, they have a documentary style that suggests you kind of have to be there.
Mm-hmm.
And there's just all this preponderance of evidence that makes us believe based off of the eyewitness accounts. Just like when we hear something on the news, we don't see it.
Right.
But those eyewitness accounts convince us to believe what we hear on the news. Now, we should have a critical thinking and try to gather as much evidence, but that's the same thing. And so there is a preponderance of evidence, not only of Jesus Christ and the resurrection, the gospel, but really of everything that we read in the Bible.
See, I told you it's better when y'all talk. That's exactly right. I really appreciate you saying that. One of the points that you brought up is that we weren't there when Jesus was alive, yet there's really no historian who is above board who says that Jesus wasn't a real person, right? I mean, this isn't like we're just imagining that there was this person there. No, history agrees that Jesus was a person, that he was there at that time, that all these people were there, all of the people around him, Pilate, all that, real people. History agrees with all of that. And those eyewitness accounts are what tell us what actually happened, right? Okay. Before we leave this, are there any other things that you would add to this list? Again, this is outside of Christianity.
Archaeologists have found evidence of the things described in the Bible in many different places.
Yes.
At different periods of time, that people have alluded to the fact that this didn't occur or this didn't happen, yet here's the physical evidence.
Yes.
So if you combine that with Genesis, it's hard to misunderstand what the scriptures teach.
Yep. The two examples I can think of, but I know there's many more. One is that someone was reading, actually it was about Noah's Ark, and how he sealed up the ark with pitch. Pitch is basically oil. And so, well, where was he? He was around, the desert, basically. It's the desert now. No one had ever thought to really look in the desert for oil. That's kind of silly, right? Okay, the other one that is that, now. But anyway, the other one was, I cannot remember the verse, but it talks about not the currents of the sea, the pathways of the sea. And at that, 100 or 200 years ago, people didn't really understand that there are, just like the jet stream in the air, I don't know if they knew about that either, that in the ocean you had the same thing, or similar things, I should say. Anything else before we move on? Oh, yes, I'm sorry.
So I was just thinking, as far as people in the rest of the world, there are a lot of people that haven't even heard of the name Jesus before,
Yes.
There's this whole 1040 window of people who don't even know exactly what Christianity is. And so their opinion on what Christianity is what the West portrays. And what the West portrays Christianity is through the media. And
Yes.
Media doesn't portray a very good image of Christianity as it is. So their opinion on what we do as Christians from the Eastern point of view is not good at all.
Yeah, no, absolutely. you watch TV shows, movies, as well as media, as well as the news, and generally Christians are not portrayed well. Okay, next up, inside of Christianity. So I'll start us off with one. I believe you're the one who said it, pride, right? Can someone be looking up? This is the longest section of verses, Luke chapter 18, verses 9 through 14. So let's talk about it while you're trying to find that. So how can we be wise in our own opinion inside of Christianity, and how can that go wrong with pride? Would that engender people towards joining the church if we were all boastful, prideful? Not really, no. Okay, can someone read for us those verses, please?
Now he also told this parable to some people who trusted in themselves that they were righteous and viewed others with contempt. Two men went up into the temple to pray, one a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. The Pharisee stood and began praying this in regard to himself. God, I thank you that I am not like the other people, swindlers, crooked adulterers, or even like this tax collector. I fast twice a week, I pay tithes of all that I get. But the tax collector, standing some distance away, was even unwilling to raise his eyes toward heaven, but beating his chest, saying, God, be merciful to me, the sinner. I tell you, this man went to his house justified rather than the other one. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, but the one who humbles himself will be exalted.
Thank you very much. Okay, so Pharisee and the tax collector, how easy is it inside of Christianity for us to look upon other Christians and think, oh, hey, at least I'm not that bad, right? This is another way that we can value our own opinion too much. We all struggle with things, but we struggle with different things. Have you ever noticed that there are some sins that are outwardly visible and some that are not? And it's really easy to put a higher priority, higher level of importance on the sins that are outwardly visible and not the ones that are inward. In this case, the tax collector and tax collectors at that time, I'm sure you've heard, it was not an exact calculation. Basically, it was however much the tax collector could get, that's what he got, and he got a portion thereof. And so they were not really seen all that favorable of light, even compared to nowadays. So this was not now of course this is a parable, this is not a very well thought of person, but who was in the right here? He was, right? He was genuinely praying, asking for forgiveness, asking for help. All right, how about legalism? We just mentioned Pharisees, but can someone read for us Matthew 12:10? So legalism, it's following the law, following the word, following the Bible, but like putting such an emphasis on the rules versus the thoughts. Okay, can someone read that for us?
Behold, there was a man who had a withered hand, and they asked him, saying, Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath? That they might accuse him.
Okay, so was that the right thing to do? Was that the right attitude for them to have to even ask that question? They were trying to get him, right? They were trying to corner him, catch him in some sort of issue. Does that mean that we don't have to worry about the rules? No, there are rules. We're supposed to follow them, but in love, right? We're supposed to have that right attitude about them. And that's where they were going wrong. The fallback lesson I always go to is in the Old Testament, God treated his children, right? Like toddlers almost. Here are the rules. You put your toys away at this time. Your bedtime is, 7 o'clock or whatever however early you can get away with it. It's going to be hard and fast rules. What's the New Testament? Old Testament, don't covet your neighbor's wife, that type of thing. In the New Testament, don't even look at her funny, right? It's hey, general thoughts, do good, right? So we can fall into legalism very easily. Other thoughts on that? How else can that go wrong? Yes, exactly. It's about the heart. That's a very good way of putting it.
It was about the heart in the Old Testament. It's
Well,
just
that's
that
true.
They didn't
It
quite catch
was.
on to that because they got caught up in the law.
Exactly.
And forgot that, the greatest commandments were love God and love your neighbor. And it was more about, tithing
Yes.
the mint and the cumin.
Exactly.
Amount.
Exactly. And when he was at,
But you hate them. Your heart is in the same place. You just didn't do the physical act.
exactly. And he even mentioned that the greatest commandment when he was asked, love your neighbor, or love God and love your neighbor. Okay. How about over-constricting? How can we be wise in our own opinion inside of Christianity? Over-constricting. Someone read for us. This is an interesting one. Joshua 10, 12 through 13. And while y'all are looking that up, over-constricting. So trying to constrain God more than God is constraining himself. It's Old Testament, but I promise there's no hard names in here.
Then Joshua spoke to the Lord in the day when the Lord delivered up the Amorites before the children of Israel. And he said in the sight of Israel, Sun, stand still over Gibeon, and moon in the valley of Ajalon. So the sun stood still, and the moon stopped, till the people had revenge upon their enemies. Is this not written in the book of Jasher? So the sun stood still in the midst of heaven, and did not hasten to go down for about a whole day.
Okay. So the sun and the moon stood still. Okay, so I'm going to purposefully stop pacing here. Am I moving, other than a little bit of fidgeting? No, I'm not moving, right? Everyone agree? Okay. Yeah, I'm actually going about 30,000 meters per second, which is, just cheating here, Mach 87. That is the speed at which the Earth is hurling itself around the sun. So, were you wrong when you said I wasn't moving? No. No, relativity, right? Relative to you, I wasn't moving. So, there's this guy named Galileo. In 1615, we had the Roman Inquisition, and it was actually Copernicus, if I remember right, who came up with the heliocentric theory, which, by the way, even that wasn't quite right? Heliocentric means the sun is the center of, in their minds, I don't know if they were really saying the whole universe, but at least the solar system. And Galileo was saying, yes, this is correct. He was an astronomer. I think he even invented the telescope, if I remember right. He was saying that, yes, the sun is the center of the solar system. And the Catholic Church said, no, that's not correct. How can that be? Well, they said it. That's against the Bible. That goes against Joshua 10, 12 through 13. They said, see, it said that the sun stopped, as in the sun had been the thing that was moving. Well, now we know that, yes, the sun is the center of the solar system, not the center of the universe. So is the Bible wrong? No. You need to, back up a little bit and think, okay, yes, the sun stopped moving relative to the earth. Now, did God actually stop the whole thing, the whole universe? He might have. We don't know. He might have. But he didn't really have to. All he had to do was stop the rotation of the earth, stop the earth from moving around the sun. Although I'm not sure how long he'd have to do that before we would have noticed. But anyway, that's all he had to do. Did he do more? Maybe. Maybe he did. But we shouldn't over-constrain God versus what he just simply says. Okay, how about adding constraints? Someone will be looking at 1 Timothy 4, 1 through 3. So how can we, inside of Christianity, add constraints, things that sound good, things that sound good to man, right, but can lead to our downfall? Any ideas? Okay?
Like, you're not supposed to get drunk.
Right.
You can't drink.
So what does the Bible say? It says that there's several verses. One is don't, like when it's talking about elders and deacons, it says not addicted to much wine. It says drunkenness is a sin, things like that. Okay. What else?
Well, there's a lot of Christian, broadly speaking, denominations that stray from what the Bible really teaches and adds a lot to it.
Yes.
If you think about the Catholics, they restrict their priests from marrying.
Yeah.
Right. And so that would be one example. And to the detriment, that's created a lot of problems.
Exactly. But it seems like a good idea. Can we not, outside of reading the Bible, explain away why we should be doing that, right? They would say, oh, well, we want people to, the priest in their case, to focus on God, that type of thing. It sounds like a good idea, but that's not what the Bible says, and it's funny that you should mention that example. Can someone read for us 1 Timothy 4, 1 through 3?
Now, the Spirit expressly says that in latter times some will depart from the faith, giving heed to deceiving spirits and doctrines of demons, speaking lies and hypocrisy, having their own conscience seared with a hard iron, forbidding to marry and commanding to abstain from food which God created to be received with thanksgiving by those who believe and know the truth.
Thank you very much. So right there we have two examples close to what you're talking about. One is forbidding to marry, exactly what you're saying. The other is forbidding to eat certain foods. And I used this in the high school class a couple of weeks ago as an example. When I was growing up, public schools, they would serve fish every Friday. Okay, sounds fine to me. It was all kind of bland food anyway. Well, why? Well, because the Catholics were, at the time, I don't know if they do this now or not, but at the time at least, they were saying that you couldn't eat, I guess it's red meat maybe, on Fridays. There's nothing in the Bible that says that we need to be doing that. Okay, I am running a little short on time here, but hey, I don't have to finish. If you all have things to add, let's go. How about removing constraints? I think this is probably, I don't know if it's just now, it seems like just now, the biggest issue. If someone can be looking at 1 Corinthians 6, verse 9. In general, it seems like people want to remove constraints. They want to make Christianity easier, right? They want it to be where we don't have to follow certain rules. Does that sound like something that we could, in our own mind, not as Christians, but in our own mind, justify to our detriment? Yeah. Thank you. If we make it easier, if we say, no, you don't have to stop what you're doing now. You can come on in as he is, don't change a thing, just say this prayer and join our band and you're all good, right? I can justify as a human how that sounds better, but it goes completely against Christianity. So can someone read for us 1 Corinthians 6, verse 9, please?
Do you not know that the unrighteous will not inherit the kingdom of God? Do not be deceived, neither fornicators, nor idolaters, nor adulterers, nor homosexuals, nor sodomites.
So every single one of those, the world right now would like to remove, when I say the world, the air quote Christians would like to remove. They'd like to say, hey, we just want to do away with this. It's too hard. We've moved on. You'll hear some say the Bible should be a living document. What does that mean? Oh, it means, well, if we don't like something, we'll just kind of, take that page out. Not at all what we're supposed to be doing. Okay, how else can be wise in our own opinions? Redefining. So 1 Peter, and for the sake of time, I'll terribly quote this, but 1 Peter 3:21, this is my favorite verse on baptism. It says, now baptism now saves you, right? Those specific words, baptism now saves you. people would like to redefine baptism and say, well, it's not really about saving. You were saved, and now you're going to express your savings to other people or something like that. Why? I never have figured out why that's such a difficult concept, but people want to redefine. And honestly, I can't come up with a good rationale for that one, but some people would. Things that seem right to a man. Okay, so very short on time. So how can we protect ourselves from doing this? One is read, study, pray, right? Back to the effect I was talking about. The more we know, the more we understand how much we don't know. The more we will be humble and understand, man, we got so much more to learn, right? Pause before speaking. And that kind of goes right into the next one. This is actually from a quote I found out, a poem I found out from Marianne Peitzker, maybe. Is it true? Is it necessary? Is it kind? Before we say something, we should say something like, let me show this person how smart I am and how wise I am. We should pause and think, okay, well, is it true? If it's not, well, we need to stop. But even if it's true, is it really going to help? Is it going to edify? Are we saying something to be right, or are we saying something to edify? And this is one I struggle with a lot. I'm a very logical person, and so I want to win every discussion, right? And if I win, then I win, right? The way I have phrased it to other people is, if you win a discussion on religion, on politics, I won't go into the other things, but if you win a discussion on that, then you definitely lost, right? Because, yeah, you may have said the right things. Yeah, maybe your point is more logical. Yeah, all that. But you lost the person. And isn't that the whole point? Yeah, so y'all remind me of that one. Except for my kids. Y'all don't listen. All right. Value others more than yourself. So I had, down in Orangeburg, South Carolina, I had an elder who, he repeated this sentiment a lot, which was, he tried to value every other member of the congregation more than himself. He tried to see he could learn something from every single one of them. Every single one of them he tried to view as more important than he was. If you do that, that will protect against the arrogance side of it. And, well, we are really out of time. Closing thoughts real quick. Everything that we do should be on a foundation of Christian love. If it's not out of love, then we're already off somehow, and we need to recalibrate ourselves. We need to balance being bold in Christ, right? Hey, if Christ says to do something, we're supposed to do it, but being humble in ourselves. That's not easy. That's like a whole sermon on itself. Excuse me. And then there is always more for us to learn, right? I know absolutely for me and probably for everyone. Okay, any closing comments, questions before we lead a prayer? Okay, so let's have a closing prayer and then we'll be dismissed. Our Father in heaven, we thank you for this time that you've given to us to come and to study your word. We ask that you please help us to take these things and apply them in our lives. And please help us to go out into the world and further your kingdom. Please forgive our sins. It's in Christ's name that we pray. Amen.